Now we're going to find out where does the derivative equal 0. So for this function, first of all, find the derivative. So you could call it dy dx, or for shorthand, you could call it y prime. The derivative of x is 1, so the derivative here is going to be 1 times a 0.5. Next, the derivative for cosine is negative sine. And then negative sine and that negative are going to cancel, so it leaves plus sine of x. Then set that equal to 0. And we need to find one value so that the derivative equals 0. So you could subtract the 0.5 from both sides. It then says, when does sine equal a negative 0.5? So in other words, if you look at the sine graph from 0 to 2 pi, it looks like this. And then this equation is saying, look at the sine graph, and when does it equal a negative 0.5? So a negative 0.5 would be about right here, because sine goes from 1 at the top to negative 1 at the bottom. And if you draw a line straight across, there's actually going to be two answers, one right here and one right here. Both of these answers are between 0 and 2 pi. Right there I said you only need to find one of them. So the next thing we could do is use sine inverse. So this right here means you're supposed to be using radians, so make sure that the calculator is in radians. If it's not, go to mode and change it to radians right there. Mine's already in radians. Now take sine inverse of a negative 0.5. And the calculator, what it's programmed to do is find the answer that's closest to the origin. So what it did is it searched close to the origin and it found this answer of negative, and I believe this is pi over something. To find out if it's pi over 6 or pi over 4 or something like that, divide it by pi, and then go to math and change that to a fraction. So it's actually negative pi over 6. So we did sine inverse and got negative pi over 6. Then what's this positive answer? Well, this graph is symmetric, so if this, from where it crosses the x-axis over to there, if that's a length of pi over 6, then where this answer is and pi, that's a length of pi over 6. So in other words, this answer is just to the right of pi. So it's going to be pi plus a pi over 6. So then pi plus pi over 6, and the variable's x, so I should say x equals. So this is 6 pi over 6 plus pi over 6, so that equals 7 pi over 6. Now before I start congratulating myself on a wonderful job, I'm going to graph it and make sure that I got it right. So graph the original function. Don't graph the derivative, always graph the original function. Let me clear out this old problem, and the new one is a 0.5x minus cosine of x. Now change the window. So this should go from 0 to 2 pi. And for the y values, this could get as big as 1. So this 0.5 times 2 pi, I don't know, I think I'll just put negative 10 to 10 and then see if I can see the graph. Yep, I can see it. Yep, I can see it. Okay, sounds good. So the derivative equals 0 right here, that little flat part, and also right here. Then check if this is correct. So that should be this point right here when it gets to the top of this little hill right here. So trace and put 7 pi over 6. That looks right. Now I'm going to double check it. Go to second calculate, ask the calculator for the derivative, and then put in 7 pi over 6. And then that should be where the derivative equals 0. The calculator says, right there, the derivative equals 0. So now that it's double checked, I'm confident that that is the correct answer.